Hello, everyone. Thank you for your attendance, and thank you for Mr. Ahmed for his fantastic presentation. Let me firstly introduce myself. My name is Mohammed Abdul Zahir, and I will be the moderator for today's panel discussion. And let me welcome our experts who will share with Mr. Ahmed the today's panel discussion. Welcome Mr. Haitham El Gindi. Welcome Mr. Mahmoud El Bagouri. In addition to what we heard from Mr. Ahmed during the presentation, I will try to raise more questions and more inquiry to share the expertise of our experts with all attendees. If we want to get more information regarding fraud, we may need to hear more details regarding real fraud cases or actual fraud cases. I will direct my first inquiry to Mr. Ahmed. Can you share your past experience with fraud cases or real fraud cases?
Hello, everyone. Thank Muhammad for your question. I remember in my last job as risk and internal audit manager, I received an email from the executive assistant of the CEO. She was asking all the manager about a transaction done using the credit card of the CEO. Taking it from there, I asked her about what's wrong, and she replied that they received an email from the bank that the card was suspended as there was a transaction which was flagged. As the organization had just issued the fraud policy which I prepared myself just a few months earlier, it was a good opportunity to implement it on a real case. Thus, I asked the CEO to initiate a fraud investigation based on the policy, which I carried out. And it revealed that the suspicious transaction was related to buying a pair of Adidas worth around $250 from UK. That was the reason why it was flagged, because at that time I was working in New Zealand. So buying this pair of shoes in UK with this amount and time, which was morning in UK but was night in New Zealand, all of this raised the flag to the banks. That's why he blocked it and suspended the card. So it was a sort of odd transaction in odd timing and place. Anyway, after further investigation, it was not involved by anyone from our organization. Thus, it was concluded that the card information might be hacked. So the CEO sent a request to the bank to cancel the card and issue a new card with new number. Then we recorded this incident in our fraud register and prepare a report to be submitted to the Risk and Audit Committee in their next meeting. The takeaway from this is that since we have a fraud policy in place, it was very easy to manage the incident and report it properly and transparency. Thank you, Muhammad.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. Let me now move to another questions related to how to properly control the fraud. I will now ask Mr. Mahmoud and then Mr. Haitham regarding what are the best practices for controlling fraud.
Thanks, Mohammed, for your question. It's my pleasure and honor being today with you, Mr. Ahmed and Mr. Haitham.
Thanks a lot.
To be fair, I will think about your question as an internal auditor, not as an fraud investigator. As an internal auditor, I will evaluate and improve three main processes: governance, risk management, and control processes over the fraud risk. I will think about the fraud risk governance and knowing the company. If it's establish a clear policies and assessing clear rules and responsibilities for fraud risk management or not. If there is in place a fraud risk management policy, a whistleblowing policy, a code of conduct, a fraud investigation policy, if there is in training or awareness for training policy in place or not. After assessing the current structure of the fraud risk governance, I will go into the fraud risk assessment. If there is in place any identification or assessment for the potential fraud risks, is the risk management, compliance, internal audit functions consider in their annual risk assessment the fraud risk with a lot of schemes and the scenarios Mr. Ahmed talked about in the fraud tree or not. And then I will talk about the control process, starting from prevention and detection to fraud. I will talk about if there is in place a control preventing or detecting a fraud risk. If there is in place a segregation of duties, there is in place access controls. If the internal audit conducting regular audits and taking in consideration either in their internal audit plan or in engagement level the fraud risk, I will think about also the fraud response. If there is in place developed procedures to respond to the detected fraud incidents. What about the investigations and corrective actions status reported to the board of directors or the audit committee? Finally, I will talk about the monitoring and reporting. If there is in place continuous monitoring for fraud risk and reporting findings to senior management and the board. I will emphasize here that the importance of a repository fraud anti-fraud program that include fraud risk assessment, incidence response, and control measures by specialized frameworks and best practices. Mr. Ahmed talked about a lot of things regarding best practices in managing fraud risk, starting by COSO fraud risk management guide, and a lot of insights highlighted from the report of the nations. We can also use the International Fraud Handbook and Fraud Tree to realize more about the fraud schemes. Thank you, Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Mahmoud. Let's move to Mr. Haytham for the same questions about best practice for controlling fraud.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Before I start, I would like to say that feel free to engage. This is for the auditees, and share your thoughts. We all would really prefer interaction as we go along. So don't hesitate to jump in if you have any question during our panel. Secondly, I totally agree with what have been said by Mr. Mahmoud. He has spoken as an internal audit. I would say the same, but in other perspective. Yeah, I would start the answer by saying that effective fraud control involves comprehensive approach. Mr. Ahmed has covered almost most of the approaches. I just would agree with him, as I said earlier, and I would add that establishing a strong control environment would help preventing and encompassing the organization's audits. The elements of a strong control environment would include leaders or leadership commitment, which is the leaders should model ethical behavior. Another element would be a code of conduct, implementing a clear and enforced code of conduct which defines acceptable behavior. As well would help in prevention of control. The third element would be ethical decision-making framework. This would provide the tools and processes that support ethical decision-making. The final from my point of view, the final element in establishing a control or a strong control environment would be the accountability structure. By other means, to define roles and responsibilities by ensuring employees at all and to understand their accountability in fraud prevention. This is one of the elements. Again, as Mr. Mahmoud has just said, a second element would be conducting regular risk assessment. By meaning regular is annual or whenever significant organizational changes occurs. This is another element. Which tools, by what tools? Using risk matrices or fraud risk checklist would help conducting regular risk assessment. Again, as Mr. Mahmoud, has just said, by implementing robust internal controls. And yeah, I wouldn't go in depth in this element, but we all know that the components of internal controls, or the major components would be segregation of duties, would be authorization protocols, would be access controls. One of the most important elements as well is providing employee training and awareness about fraud. By other words, educate staff about fraud risks, detection methods, as Mr. Ahmed said in his presentation, and reporting mechanisms to foster vigilance and prompt reporting. This is what I wanted to add, or just to repeat with another perspective after Mr. Mahmoud has just answered the question. As I said earlier, if anybody has any question to add or to ask, just jump in, unmute, and ask his question, and we will, all of the three of us, will answer his question at the end of this panel. Thank you, Mr. Muhammad. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Haytham. I believe Mr. Ahmed Al-Qushayri has a question.
Yes. Is this to me or to the panel?
Hello.
Or, hello.
No, this is to panel. Hello, dear respectful gentlemen. Hello, Mr. Mahmoud Al-Bajouri, my brother. I'm Ahmed Al-Qushayri. I'm working as Enterprise Risk and Compliance Manager in Saudi German hospitals in the UAE. My question is related to the MDM, the Master Data Management. I need to know more about the Master Data Management, like a price list and the Master Item Data Fraud Risk Assessment, especially how we can structure a proper process to prevent any fraud cases related this master data.
Okay, can I start, Dears? From my perspective, starting from the access rights to the master data files, it's a crucial control. We have to know whom had access rights to such master files, okay? And then the rules provided or granted to whom had access to master files, who have the authority or the responsibility or for amending any data of in place in our systems or engage in our systems, who had the authority to delete or update or upgrade any data recorded in our system. I will participate here only about access management and leave my esteemed panelists to reply to your question with an other perspective or other point of view.
Thank you, Mahmoud. Thank you.
in addition to what Mr. Mahmoud has just mentioned, you have to look at these cases through the IT lenses. So you have to see what IT controls you have, what cybersecurity you have, the firewalls you're using, password prevention. You could refer to, for example, COPIT, which is IT controls worldwide adopted. All of this will give you a proper indication or proper setup for how you are going to manage or control your risk or your any other risks related to the IT itself. I think that going forward, we need to focus and adopt and to look at the IT audit. Now, it is not just knowing how to audit as financial and operation, but we also need to know how to audit the IT systems. So that's what I think you need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmed Al-Kushairi, for your questions. Thank you, our experts, for your response. I will appreciate.
Can I add something, Mohammed, to these questions regarding the regulatory compliance? I think about the topic already highlighted by Mr. Ahmed. We have here a lot of regulations or regulatory compliance regarding the data privacy laws in our region. Globally, we have in European Union, we have the GDPR. In Egypt, we have already data privacy law. In Saudi Arabia, we have the DBLP, the data privacy law in Saudi Arabia. I think also in United Arab Emirates, you have laws specific for data privacy. We have taken consideration in our configuration for any data started by the data collection, the data mining, the data sharing, also confirmations from the client or the data owner regarding his confirmation about sharing his data with special purposes like governmental agencies and so on. I think it's crucial to take in consideration the regulatory compliance side of data privacy. Thank you.
Thank you. All attendees are encouraged also to drop questions through chat, and I will transfer to our experts by end of our discussion. I will come back again to Mr. Haytham regarding controls related to fraud. And may I ask Mr. Haytham and Mr. Ahmed also, do you think controls only can manage fraud?
While internal controls are critical for mitigating fraud risks, they cannot prevent fraud entirely on their own. Fraud prevention requires comprehensive strategy that integrates controls with cultural, educational, procedural measures. There are some complementary elements necessary for an effective fraud management. As we mentioned before, employee education is one of the elements. By what fraud awareness training, of course, reporting mechanisms, rule-specific trainings. Another element, which is ethical culture. Why is this important? It is important because the organization with a strong ethical culture reduces the likelihood of fraudulent behavior. The elements, again, of the ethical culture would include tone at the top, code of ethics, encouraging transparency, ethical decision-making. Another element, which is with the same importance as the two elements, which is continuous monitoring. Why is it important as well? Fraudsters consistently evolve their tactics. So continuous monitoring would enable early detection of fraudulent activities. What are the key components of this continuous monitoring? For example, automated monitoring tools, regular audit cycles, risk assessment updates, management dashboards. All of these are components of continuous monitoring which should be performed by the entity. Another element would be incident response plan, which consists of clear reporting, investigation teams, evidence prevention. All of these are elements that could help or could prevent fraud from happening. This could be complementary or could help strengthen controls to manage fraud. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haitham. I will direct now the same questions to Mr. Ahmed. Do you think controls only can manage fraud?
Thank you, Mohammed. I agree with what Mr. Haitham has already stated, that ethics is one of the most important points. Control by itself cannot manage fraud. Ethical culture is what manages fraud. Remember the fraud triangle. One of the dimension is motivation. So if someone is motivated to commit fraud, no control in place can prevent him from committing this fraud. It is just a matter of time before he can successfully carry out his plan. But if we have an ethical culture, like for example, supporting staff, speak out if you have a problem, all of this will help. If someone in trouble, before thinking about, I need this money, I can commit this fraud, I can get this money through this fraud, he just can come to the management or the colleagues or his manager and say that I have 1, 2, 3 issue, if you can support me. And definitely companies can put more in such support rather than lose any money because of fraud.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. Now I will move to another hot topic, which is related to the relation between internal audit and fraud management. Many stakeholders believe that internal auditors are the ultimate responsible for managing fraud. I will direct my questions to Mr. Mahmoud. From your point of view, what is the relationship between fraud and the internal audit?
Thank you, Mohammed. I will start by that every employee in any organization should act as a fraud fighter. That's the first thing I have to highlight. Second part, the relationship between internal audit and risk management in relation to fraud risk. Internal audit is an integral part of the organizational overall risk management strategy, because that internal audit plays a crucial role in assessing and mitigating fraud risk. But it's about the rules and responsibilities already in place in every organization, and the organizational structure. If we can take an example from the banking sector, they have already fraud management teams or anti-fraud management teams specialized in managing fraud risk. If we are talking about telecom industries, the telecommunication companies, also due to the complexity of the activities and transactions, they have a specialized team in taking in consideration fraud management and revenue assurance risks. But in general, if we highlighted the SFE 2024 report of the nations source for fraud, we will see that 43% of identified fraud cases came through the tips lines or the hotlines or the whistleblowing hotlines. 14% identified by the internal auditors during audit engagements and so on. 13% by reviews, considering compliance and risk management regular reviews. Accordingly, internal auditors only not responsible for managing fraud risk. It is a holistic responsibility. Every member of any organization is responsible for fighting fraud, particularly in industries or based on the company structure. We will say we can identify the responsibilities allotted in every section regarding fraud. Internal auditors are responsible mainly for providing independent and objective assurance on the effectiveness of the organization's governance, risk management, and control processes. Accordingly, they will be responsible for providing an independent and objective assurance about the fraud risk from the governance perspective and risk management and control also, by identifying the red flags, by evaluating the existed controls in place, by taking in consideration on the annual level risk assessment the fraud risks, and also add to every fraud to every engagement risk assessment section for fraud risks. Also, internal audit advising management and to provide recommendations to control and improve the fraud prevention and detection measures. In addition to the investigating part, internal auditors may be responsible for investigating fraud incidents or being a part of a team responsible for investigating any fraud incidents. By performing the internal audit function responsibilities, starting from the fraud risk assessment, advising the management, assisting any fraud incident investigations, evaluating the controls, and identifying the red flags. From my perspective, they will add and help the organization to create again a robust anti-fraud environment and enhance their ability to respond swiftly and effectively to fraud incidents. And finally, internal audit not only responsible for fraud, it is everyone's responsibility. Thank you, Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Mahmoud. And based on your great response, I will seek now the insights from of Mr. Haytham related to who and how should a fraud investigation be carried out.
Okay, let's start by conducting a fraud investigation. Who, as we all know, that fraud investigations are critical for uncovering and addressing misconduct within the organization. The team who conduct the fraud investigation should include, or in another way, may include internal auditors, forensic accountants, legal counsel, IT specialists. Let's go in depth. Internal auditors to assess and test internal controls to identify the weaknesses exploited by the fraudster. Forensic accountants to analyze complex financial data to detect irregularities. Legal counsel to ensure that all investigative actions comply with legal requirements to avoid jeopardizing potential litigation. IT specialist, finally, to retrieve and analyze digital evidence, including emails, such as email system logs and access records. This is about the fraud or the investigative team. How the investigation process included 5 steps as any other process, which starts by planning, evidence collection, analysis, reporting, and legal action. Planning, which is the first step in the process. Of course, its objective is to define the goals and parameters of the investigation. The output from the planning should be an investigation roadmap, which ensure that all team members are aligned. Planning step. The evidence collection, of course, its objective is to gather all the relevant information and documentation. Information of the types of evidence is like physical, digital, testimonies information. The methods that could be used in evidence collection should be review of the financial records, analyze digital system, conducting interviews with employees. This is the step number 2. Number 3 is to analyze the evidence which were collected by examining and analyzing the evidence to uncover the fraud and its scope. The outcome or the output is a detailed understanding of how the fraud occurred, who was involved, and its financial and operational impact. The 4th step should be the reporting, which objective is to document the finding and recommended actions. Of course, the components of the report, as we understand, should start with the executive summary, scope and methodology, finding and the impact, and finally the recommendation. The format of the report as well should be clear language to ensure that stakeholders and legal authorities can understand the finding. The final step will be the legal action, which objective is address the fraud through appropriate legal channels. Its key activities should be coordination with law enforcement, prepare the evidence and documentation, engage with regulators, and finally pursue the restriction to recover the financial losses if there will be any. This is the steps of the fraud investigation process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Haytham, for such a detailed explanation. I will move now to another hot topic related to detecting fraud. Fraud is mostly detected by tips, such as whistleblower hotline. I will direct my questions to Mr. Mahmoud. In practical terms, who should control the whistleblower hotline?
Thank you, Muhammad. To be fair, the main thing here is the independency and the objectivity level of the ownership and control over the whistleblowing hotline. Who is independent and objective enough to own such critical enterprise level control like the whistleblowing hotline? I will highlight again that 43% of fraud cases identified through the whistleblowing hotline. Accordingly, in practical terms, the ownership and control of the whistleblowing hotline should be ideally rest with independent and objective function within the organization to ensure confidentiality and biasness. Okay. Scenarios here, it will be internal audit, because the internal audit department is one of the well-positioned and managed functions. They can manage the whistleblowing hotline because they have an overcharging and holistic overview over the organization, and also they are independent enough from the day-to-day operation. In another organizations, we can say that compliance department is the owner of the whistleblowing hotline, but here it should be independent enough from management, and they must have a reporting line to the board of directors or subsidiary committee from the board of directors, like the audit committee or compliance and ethics committee, to rest such responsibility over the whistleblowing hotline. For added more assurance, we can say that one of the practical solutions already in place and companies use is external third-party provider. He is responsible for the whistleblowing hotline, saving and added more assurance regarding the anonymous of the received tips by having entity controls over the hotline. Organizations can foster the culture of openness and trust, encouraging employees to report misconduct without fear or retaliation. It is aligned with the best practices for fraud risk management and ensuring also that allegations are handled professionally and confidentially. Internal audit may be responsible for compliance functions, may be responsible for the whistleblowing hotline, or assigning an external third-party service provider for such critical control. Thank you, Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Mahmoud, for your detailed explanation. I will move now to another topic, which is related to specific laws related to fraud. Fraud is often subject to specific laws and regulation. I will direct my question to Mr. Ahmed. What are the major laws related to fraud, whether local or international laws?
Thank you, Muhammad. If you want to look about the laws and regulation worldwide, we find that most of them are focusing on transparency, but each country has its own set of laws and regulation focused. So, for example, if we look at US, so the US have the main laws will be the Foreign Corruption Practice Act, Sarbanes-Oxley Act, some fraud regulation, different like mail fraud, for example. All of this, it focus on financial crimes more. That's the main focus area. Its corporate liability is extensive. Its penalty is severe if you commit any fraud. If you move to UK, for example, you have the Bribery Act 2010, you have the Fraud Act 2006. It focuses on the commercial and public bribery, while US is financial crimes mostly. And again, the penalty is also severe if you commit any fraud. While if we move to the Middle East area, so you have in UAE, you have the Federal Decree Law number 20 of 2018 of anti-money laundering. The focus area here is financial compliance and anti-money laundering. So this is the main focus. So which is different from the other US and UK. The penalty compared to US and UK, you can say that is moderate. Saudi Arabia, it has the anti-bribery law in 1992, and there is another reforms come with Saudi Vision 2030. The focus area is for bribery and integrity, and the penalty is higher than UAE, but still lower than US and UK. In Egypt, the bribery or the fraud is covered by the Penal Code article from 103 till 111 and law number 1 of 2016 on combating corruption, anti-money laundering, and finally law number 80 of 2002. The main focus for Egypt is for public corruption. This is the main area. Compared penalty severity compared to other country will be considered moderate. All of this different countries, they focus on transparency, making everything legal, make sure that if someone commit any kind of fraud should be liable. The penalty, of course, differ from country to another. All of this direct us that all countries take serious steps to make sure that fraud is addressed properly and there is enough legislation to cover any fraud crime that might happen.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmed.
Thank you, Mohammed.
Let's move to another topic
Each
now,
industry might have some sort of,
which is related
let's
to
say,
fraud
unique fraud
techniques
cases that
or
might
methods.
be related to this
Fraud
industry.
techniques may vary from
If we
industry
think about
to another.
banking and financial service,
I will
on
now
top of
ask
the list
Mr.
would be
Ahmed
the Ponzi scheme.
firstly, and then
So
Mr.
the Ponzi scheme
Mahmoud
where
about
you collect money
examples
from
of fraud
someone
schemes or
and
techniques relating to specific
pay
industries.
dividend or interest to a second one and collect more money, and the cycle go on. It named by Ponzi because the first one, his name was Ponzi, he's from Italy. Second might be insider trader. So you know information and you try to benefit from this information before the public knows the same information. If we think about healthcare, we might face billing fraud, where you claim more for the insurance company than the actual service provided. Kickbacks, sometimes you get payment for referrer, something like that. Of course, if we move to sector like construction, real estate, so you might think about bid rigging. So contractors collude to inflate project costs or fix bidding outcomes, and of course mortgage fraud. So you falsely either you increase the price of the unit to get more funds, or you provide false information to get the mortgage yourself. Technology will be like cyber fraud, phishing emails, data manipulation, and identity theft now coming at the top. You have manufacturing, inventory theft, suppliers kickback. We have a lot of industry to cover, but I think this might be the most or the main point that you can use for now.
Thank you, Ahmed. I will focus my answer regarding the overstatements of revenues as a fraud scheme under the fraud tree already mentioned by Mr. Ahmed in the first section of our today's seminars as a part of the financial statements fraud, but I will take it from two industries. In telecom industry, the revenue recognition, it's the main and very critical calculation regarding the financial statements fraud. Telecom company might recognize revenue from long-term contracts before they have fully provided the services. If we can imagine in another side from the prepaid mobile lines, companies can recognize revenues from the charged balances only before the calls already happened. That means that we have an overstatements of revenues regarding fraud, regarding the company's revenue. Another example regarding the revenue overstatements in real estate, while real estate developers recognize the revenue from a project before the project is consistently completed, For instance, if developers is working on a multi-year residential complex, they might record the entire project revenue in the first year, even though only a small portion of the work has been completed or delivered. This inflates the company revenues figures and mispresent its financial health, and considered as a financial statements fraud under the overstatement revenue scheme. I can also give an example regarding the factitious employee fraud scheme. It's also well known in the heavy employee industries like construction and manufacturing. That came to my head now as a well-known fraud cases in several industries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mahmoud, Mr. Ahmed, for such a great explanation. Now we will give sometimes for Q&A. I received questions related to rule of CEE in new IIA standards for management. I will share it with our experts, and attendees are interested to hear your thoughts.
Okay, can I add something to my colleague Ahmed regarding fraud specifically? The same standards highlighted from the previous internal audit standards, the competency. We have to make sure that our team collectively, at least we have someone who is known more about the fraud red flags, the fraud investigation techniques, if we need to conduct such investigations. If it's already mandated in the internal audit charter, the due professional care standards talks about fraud and the development of the internal audit competencies to make sure that we have such a competency collectively in the internal audit department to know more about the fraud red flags, how we can assess the fraud risk, and recommend also controls to manage and mitigate the impact of fraud risk. Also, from the new standards highlighted, from my perspective, the main new standards or the main new changes we have to take in our consideration that the internal audit strategy, it is very important standard. It is new in the global internal audit standards. Accordingly, we may take in our we may take care about fraud in our internal audit strategy. Also, the internal audit mandate and how we can communicate the mandate with board and senior management. I think those highlights are very important for every chief audit executive regarding the new standards itself or highlighting the fraud responsibility regarding the internal audit.
Thank you, Mr. Mahmoud. Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. Another questions from Mr. Ahmed Ibrahim. Please feel free.
Assalamu alaikum. First, I'd like to thank you all for your generous presence today. And I just have a little confusion about the difference between the key RIs and the key fraud indicators. And can we combine them while conducting a specific fraud engagement?
Can I answer the question on behalf of my colleagues? Key risk indicators are general indicators we can take in our consideration while assessing risk. or while monitoring risk in general. But the fraud red flags, it's specifically red flags or indicators highlighting fraud-specific schemes. We can use the fraud red flags as a key risk indicator. Yes, we can. But in managing fraud risk, from my perspective, we have to be specific to the fraud schemes. Accordingly, we can select an appropriate that manage such scheme. I wish I answered your question.
Thank you, Mr. Mahmoud. Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. Any more questions? Our experts are interested to hear from your side. Okay, I wish to thank all of you for your attendance for our fraud risk management webinar today. I wish to thank our experts, Mr. Haitham, Mr. Mahmoud, Mr. Ahmed, for their efforts to enrich the discussion and give us very practical information from their great experience. And hopefully to meet soon in another events in the presence of our fantastic experts who enriched us today. Thanks a lot, everybody, and see you soon, inshallah.